Ladies and gentlemen, I want to remind you today, just because life feels heavy doesn't mean you have to carry the weight in your soul. You might be walking through a storm, facing pressure, dealing with things no one else can see, but let me tell you, there's a joy inside you that circumstances can't steal, a strength that sorrow can't silence. You weren't created to live defeated, discouraged, and down. No, you were created to rise on the inside, even when everything around you is falling apart. You may not feel happy, but when you choose happiness, even when you don't feel like it, that's when the breakthrough begins. That's when the healing starts. That's when heaven takes notice. So don't wait for everything to get easier. Don't wait for all the pieces to fall into place. Force yourself to smile. Force yourself to hope. Force yourself to be happy. Because that's not just pretending, that's faith in action. That's your spirit saying, I'm not staying down. I'm rising up. Happiness is a decision, not a reaction. Choose it daily, not circumstantially. That sounds simple on the surface, but it goes against how most people are wired to think. Many folks live on an emotional roller coaster, up when things go well, down when they don't. They tie their joy to their job, their peace to their paycheck, and their happiness to how others treat them. But what if I told you that real, lasting happiness doesn't come from what's happening around you, but what you decide within you? You see, when you make the choice to be happy, even when nothing gives you a reason to be, that's when you take your power back. That's when you stop being a slave to circumstance and start becoming the master of your mindset. Happiness, when truly understood, is not about the absence of problems. It's about the presence of purpose. You can be going through challenges, facing heartbreak, dealing with uncertainty, and still walk in joy, because joy comes from a deeper place. It's not tied to your bank account, your relationship status, or the opinions of others. It comes from the quiet decision you make each morning to say, no matter what comes my way, I will choose to rejoice. Not because life is perfect, but because you are bigger than what you're facing. Too often, people let the day dictate their mood. They wake up and check the news, social media, or emails, and within minutes, their emotions are hijacked. Someone said something negative, traffic was bad, the deal didn't go through, and just like that, they've surrendered their peace. But imagine if instead you started your day by saying, today I'm choosing joy. I'm not going to let the little things steal my smile. I'm not giving my power away to problems that are temporary. That's not denial, that's discipline. That's not ignoring reality, it's choosing a higher reality. When you decide to be happy in spite of, not because of, you begin to build emotional resilience. That means you don't just survive setbacks, you rise through them. You don't collapse under pressure, you grow stronger. You begin to show the world and yourself that happiness isn't about luck, it's about leadership. Leading your thoughts, leading your focus, leading your reactions. That's what mature joy looks like. It doesn't need approval, applause, or everything going right to show up and shine. Think about it, your greatest breakthroughs didn't come when everything was easy. They came when you decided to keep moving, to keep believing, to keep smiling, even when your heart was heavy. That's the kind of happiness that carries you through the storm. It's not loud or flashy, but it's powerful. It's the kind of joy that says, I know I'm hurting, but I'm still standing. It's the kind of joy that says, I may not understand this season, but I trust the one who holds my future. That choice to rejoice again and again is how you shift your atmosphere, change your energy, and open the door to peace that passes understanding. This is especially important because life will always give you reasons to feel down. If you wait for perfect circumstances to be happy, you'll wait forever. But if you say, no, I'm making up my mind, I'm going to look for the good. I'm going to laugh even if I don't feel like it. I'm going to praise even in the pain. Now you're tapping into something supernatural. You're not reacting anymore. You're choosing. You're leading your soul forward. And every time you do that, you get stronger. Your spirit gets louder than your stress. Your faith gets bolder than your fear. Some people think happiness is a luxury, but it's actually a necessity. Why? Because your energy follows your emotion. When you choose joy, you energize your life. You can't be creative, focused, or effective if you're always drained by discouragement. But when you wake up with intention, when you smile on purpose, when you declare that today is a gift no matter what's going wrong, that changes everything. Not always around you, but always within you. And when your inner world gets strong, your outer world starts to shift too. This is a daily decision. You don't choose joy once and then coast forever. You wake up every day and say, I may not feel it, but I'm going to live it. I may not see the blessing yet, but I'm going to celebrate like it's already on the way. That kind of attitude doesn't come naturally. It has to be trained. Just like working out your body, you've got to train your mind to think on good things, to expect favor, to anticipate joy, even in the middle of mess. You begin to rewire your thinking so that happiness isn't a reaction, it's a habit. It becomes who you are, not just what you feel. Your feelings follow your focus, shift your attention to what uplifts you. Most people don't realize how much power they have over their emotions. They assume feelings just happen to them, like the weather or the traffic. But the truth is, feelings are followers. They follow your focus. Whatever you magnify in your mind, you multiply in your emotions. If you dwell on what's wrong, you start to feel heavy. If you keep replaying the hurt, you stay stuck in sadness. But the moment you shift your focus to what's still right, to what's still beautiful, to what's still possible, something begins to lift on the inside. Your mind is like a magnifying glass. Wherever you aim it, whatever you zoom in on begins to expand. And the more you stare at your problems, the bigger they seem. The more you dwell on disappointments, the more overwhelming they feel. But if you make the decision to shift your attention, to fix your thoughts on hope, gratitude, and the promises of God, your emotions begin to follow. You may not feel joyful right away, but your spirit starts to rise. You begin to create an inner atmosphere of faith instead of fear, peace instead of panic. Many people are in emotional distress not because of what happened to them, but because they keep focusing on it. They keep rehearsing the offense, replaying the betrayal, reliving the loss. And every time they do, they reopen the wound. But when you change your focus, when you start meditating on healing instead of hurt, growth instead of grief, your emotions begin to line up with your new direction. You're no longer a prisoner of your past, you become a participant in your healing. This is why it's so important to guard your thoughts. Not every thought deserves your attention. Not every feeling needs your validation. Sometimes your mind will try to pull you into worry, but you have to pull it back into worship. Sometimes your thoughts will spiral into negativity, but you can interrupt that pattern by speaking life, by choosing gratitude, by reminding yourself of who you are and where you're going. That's not just positive thinking, that's powerful focus. Think about someone walking a tightrope. If they keep looking down, they'll lose balance. But if they keep their eyes fixed straight ahead, they can walk steadily, even with pressure on both sides. Life is a lot like that. When you focus on what's beneath you, your problems, your fears, your failures, you lose emotional balance. But when you lift your eyes and focus on what's above your purpose, your calling, your blessings, you begin to move forward with peace and stability. The enemy knows he can't take your purpose, so he tries to hijack your focus. He wants to keep your attention on everything that's going wrong, so he can't see what's going right. He wants you so consumed by fear that you forget your faith, but you don't have to let him. You can take your focus back. You can decide, I'm not going to dwell on the worst case scenario. I'm going to look for the best case promises. You can redirect your mental energy from despair to hope, from anxiety to anticipation. You might say, but I've got real problems. And yes, you do. We all do. But focusing on them 24/7 doesn't fix them, it fuels them. Whatever you feed gets stronger. If you feed your doubts, they grow. If you feed your gratitude, it grows. If you keep focusing on who left, what broke, what's missing, you'll feel empty. But if you start focusing on who stayed, what remains, what's still working, you'll begin to feel full again. Your brain is wired to respond to focus. Neurologically, what you give attention to builds stronger pathways in your mind. That's why Scripture says to think on things that are pure, lovely, admirable, because your thoughts shape your chemistry, your perspective, and eventually your destiny. The more you focus on goodness, the more you'll feel grounded in joy. The more you focus on peace, the more your anxiety begins to dissolve. This is not wishful thinking, it's intentional living. You don't have to wait for your emotions to change before you take control of your focus. In fact, your emotions will often resist you at first, but as you keep choosing to see the light, to speak the truth, to count your blessings, something begins to shift. Maybe not all at once, but moment by moment, the fog starts to lift, the tears begin to dry, the energy returns. Not because the problem disappeared, but because your perception transformed. That's the power of focus. It becomes the steering wheel of your soul. And wherever you point it, your feelings are going to follow. Gratitude is the gateway to joy. Find one thing to thank God for, even in pain. In the middle of difficulty, when life feels heavy and hope seems distant, the mind naturally gravitates toward what's missing, what's broken, or what's unfair. But gratitude interrupts that spiral. It doesn't ignore the pain, but it invites perspective into it. When you find even one thing to be thankful for, even if it's small, you start to open a door that allows joy to enter your spirit. That's why gratitude isn't just a nice idea, it's a lifeline. When we face challenges, our instincts often lead us to complain, to question, to feel like victims. And while that may be understandable, it also keeps us stuck. What gratitude does is shift our posture. Instead of looking down in despair, we begin to look up in faith. Even a whispered thank you in a dark moment can start to bring light. That one thank you could be for breath in your lungs, for strength to stand, for someone who hasn't given up on you, for the simple fact that you woke up this morning. When you start looking for reasons to give thanks, your heart slowly begins to remember that not all is lost. Gratitude isn't about pretending everything's fine when it's not. It's about finding the one thing that still is fine and anchoring your hope to it. That one thing becomes the seed of joy. You water it with thankfulness, and over time it begins to grow. At first, it might feel forced. You may have to say, God, I don't understand what I'm going through, but thank you that I'm not going through it alone. That kind of gratitude is raw and real. It's not surface level positivity, it's soul level trust. There's something powerful that happens when you thank God in the middle of trouble. It declares that the trouble does not have the final word. It declares that your pain is not the end of your story. Gratitude becomes your resistance to despair. It becomes your quiet rebellion against bitterness. It tells your heart, we're not going to stay stuck in sorrow. We're going to remember that there's still good in the middle of the grief. Some of the most joyful people in the world are not the ones who have the most, but the ones who are most grateful for what they have. That's because joy doesn't come from accumulation, it comes from appreciation. You can have all the money, all the success, all the applause, and still feel empty if you've lost your sense of gratitude. On the other hand, you can be walking through hard times, carrying unanswered prayers, wrestling with pain, and still radiate joy because your heart has learned to say thank you in all circumstances. Gratitude rewires your thinking. It breaks the cycle of negativity. Instead of dwelling on what went wrong, it focuses on what's still right. Instead of obsessing over what you lost, it honors what you still have. When you develop a habit of gratitude, your perspective begins to shift. You start noticing small blessings you used to overlook, the kindness of a stranger, the laughter of a child, the warmth of the sun on your face. These moments may seem insignificant, but they become holy when gratitude is present. It's not always easy to find something to thank God for when your heart is breaking, but that's when gratitude becomes most powerful. That's when it becomes an act of faith. You're not thanking God because of the pain, but in the pain. You're saying, God, this hurts, but I still trust you. I don't see the full picture, but I'm choosing to believe that you are still good. That kind of gratitude is not shallow, it's deep. It comes from a soul that has decided to keep believing even when it doesn't feel like it. You don't have to wait until everything makes sense to be grateful. You can be grateful right now in the middle of the unknown. You can choose to see the fingerprints of grace in your life, even when the full story hasn't unfolded. And when you do, something shifts inside of you. The weight begins to lift. The tears don't stop immediately, but they start to fall with purpose instead of hopelessness. Gratitude begins to rebuild what pain tried to destroy. Your joy isn't waiting on a change of circumstances, it's waiting on a change of focus. And that change begins with thankfulness. One small thank you becomes a spark, then another, and another, until eventually your spirit is illuminated not by perfect circumstances, but by a heart that knows how to find the light in dark places. Don't wait for the storm to pass. Dance in the rain with faith and expectation. Life doesn't always wait until you're ready. The storms come without warning. The winds pick up, the skies darken, and suddenly you're in the middle of something you didn't ask for, didn't plan for, and don't feel prepared to handle. Most people freeze in those moments. They say, let me just survive this. Let me hide until it's over. But what if the breakthrough isn't found in waiting for calm skies, but in learning how to move, how to praise, how to stand tall, even while the storm is still raging? That phrase, dance in the rain, speaks to a radical shift in mindset. It means you stop putting your life on pause until conditions are perfect. It means you stop saying, I'll be joyful when things settle down, or I'll be at peace once I get through this. No, you decide that right in the middle of the mess, right in the chaos, you're still going to show up with expectation. You're still going to move with purpose. You're still going to smile, even if there are tears in your eyes. Because your joy is not tied to the absence of struggle, it's rooted in the presence of God. Faith doesn't require an easy path. In fact, it shines brightest in difficulty. When you decide to worship when everything around you says worry, when you choose laughter, when everything around you says panic, when you get up and keep walking even though the storm hasn't let up, that's faith in action. That's not pretending everything's okay. That's saying, even if it's not okay, I still know who's in control. I still believe that this storm is not the end of my story. Many people spend their lives waiting for the storm to be over before they live again. They say, once this health issue is resolved, then I'll be happy. Once my finances improve, then I'll have peace. Once this heartache passes, then I'll move forward. But storms have a way of lingering. And if you wait for them to pass before you live, you'll spend too much time surviving and not enough time thriving. That's why you've got to find your rhythm in the rain. You've got to look for beauty in the brokenness, hope in the hardship, joy in the journey, even when the thunder is still rumbling. Think about children. Give them a rainy day in a puddle, and what do? They jump in it. They laugh, they play. They don't see the rain as a problem, they see it as part of the adventure. Somewhere along the way, life teaches us to stop dancing in the rain and to start dreading it. But what if you could unlearn that fear? What if you could tap back into that wonder? That sense of resilience that says, this might not be what I expected, but I'm still going to find a way to move forward with joy. It takes courage to dance in the rain. It takes a defiant kind of hope to say, yes, it's hard. Yes, I feel the pressure, but I'm not giving up my joy. I'm not letting go of my faith. That kind of posture doesn't just affect you, it affects everyone around you. People see you holding your head high in the storm, and it reminds them that they can do the same. Your courage becomes contagious. Your peace becomes a testimony. Not because everything is perfect, but because you've chosen not to wait for perfect to live with purpose. Dancing in the rain also teaches you something about trust. When you choose to move through the storm, you're saying, God, I believe you're with me. I believe you're still working. I believe something good is going to come out of this. That expectation, that belief becomes your anchor. It holds you steady even when everything feels uncertain. It keeps your heart open, your spirit soft, and your eyes focused on possibility instead of just pain. Some storms you can't control. Some rain you can't avoid. But you can choose your response. You can decide that you won't let the storm define your mood, your mindset, or your movement. You can choose to make the most of the moment you're in. And when you do, you take back your power. You refuse to be a victim of the weather. You become a person of vision, someone who knows how to find light. even when the sky is gray. It's in these rainy moments that your faith gets forged. It's where character is built. It's where you discover that joy isn't fragile, it's fierce. It doesn't hide from storms. It dances through them. It sings even when it's soaked. It keeps believing when others have given up. And when the storm finally passes, and it always does, you'll come out stronger, not because you waited, but because you moved through it with expectation and unshakable faith. Your joy is your weapon. When you smile and struggle, you silence the enemy. There's something powerful that happens when you decide to walk through pain with praise, when you meet pressure with peace, when you answer opposition with a joyful heart. Joy is not weakness, it's not denial. It's strength in disguise. It's your reminder to the world and to yourself that the darkness doesn't get the final say, that the heaviness doesn't get to hold you down, that what was meant to crush you is actually building something stronger in you. Joy is not just a nice emotion to have when life is good. It's a weapon in spiritual warfare. It pushes back against despair. It disrupts fear. It disarms anxiety. Choose joy in a place that was meant to defeat you. The atmosphere shifts. You may not be able to control the storm outside of you, but when you pick up joy like a sword, you start to fight from the inside out. You're no longer waiting for life to give you permission to smile. You're declaring, I've already decided to rejoice, no matter what. When you smile and struggle, it's not about pretending, it's about positioning. You're positioning your heart to stay open to hope. You're positioning your mind to look for the blessing, even in brokenness. You're reminding your spirit that circumstances don't determine your worth, your peace, or your power. That kind of joy isn't ordinary, it's supernatural. It doesn't make sense to people who don't know the depth of your faith. It doesn't align with what the world teaches, but it aligns with what heaven honors. Smiling in struggle doesn't mean you're not feeling the weight. It means you're choosing not to let the weight take your voice, your laughter, or your perspective. It's saying this hurts, but it won't harden me. This season is stretching me, but it won't steal me. The enemy doesn't know what to do with someone who refuses to break. He expects you to collapse under the pressure. He expects you to turn bitter. But when you lift your head, lift your voice, and smile anyway, it sends a message that you are not going down, you are rising. Joy keeps your heart soft, and a soft heart is a powerful thing. It means you can keep loving even after being let down. It means you can keep believing even after disappointment. It means you can stay grateful even in uncertainty. Joy lets you carry both truth and trust. You can acknowledge the struggle and still expect a miracle. You can feel the sorrow and still hold on to the promise. Joy gives you access to peace in chaos and clarity in confusion. There's a reason Scripture says, the joy of the Lord is your strength. Because when everything around you is shaking, that joy anchors you. It doesn't remove the storm, but it stabilizes your soul. It gives you something deeper than circumstance. It's not loud or showy. It can be quiet, steady, and strong. And in a world that's constantly trying to pull you into fear, into doubt, into stress, choosing joy is how you fight back. You're not ignoring reality. You're choosing a higher reality. People may not understand how you're still smiling. They may look at what you're going through and wonder how you haven't lost your mind. But that's the beauty of joy. It's a testimony. It says, yes, I've been through some things, but I'm still here. Yes, I've cried, but I've also praised. Yes, I've been tested, but I've also grown. Your joy speaks louder than your pain. It lets the world know that something greater is sustaining you. Joy also has momentum. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. It starts with one decision, one moment of praise in the pressure, one deep breath in the chaos, one thank you whispered in the pain, and then another, and another, until your joy is no longer just a reaction, it becomes your rhythm. You start to live from a place of inner power instead of outer panic. You start to respond with wisdom instead of worry. And before you know it, you're not just surviving the battle, you're influencing others with the light you carry. The enemy's goal is always to get you to forfeit your joy. Because if he can get your joy, he can drain your strength. He can cloud your vision. He can distract your purpose. But when you hold on to joy, you keep your energy, your passion, your direction. You can walk through fire and not come out smelling like smoke because your spirit has stayed clean. Your joy covered you. Your smile disarmed the attack. And even if you were wounded, you didn't lose your wonder. Even if it got dark, you didn't forget how to shine. That's what it means to fight with joy. That's what it means to turn your smile into a spiritual weapon. Faith doesn't deny reality, it declares a better future in the middle of it. So often people misunderstand faith. They think it means ignoring what's going on, pretending everything is fine, putting on a smile while they're falling apart inside. But real faith isn't about denial, it's about declaration. It doesn't close its eyes to the facts, it simply believes that facts are not the end of the story. Faith sees the pain, acknowledges the loss, recognizes the difficulty and speaks to speak hope, still speak hope to expect good, still chooses to believe in what hasn't yet been seen. There's a difference between living in fantasy and living in faith. Fantasy avoids the truth. It hides from the hard things. But faith walks straight into the fire and says, I know this looks bad, but I serve a God who makes a way through the flames. Faith doesn't deny the diagnosis, but it declares healing. It doesn't deny the heartbreak, but it declares restoration. It doesn't deny the storm, but it declares peace in the middle of it. That's what makes faith powerful. It refuses to be silent in the face of struggle. It lifts its voice and speaks life where there's death, vision where there's darkness, strength where there's weakness. Every person who's ever seen a miracle started by standing in front of an impossibility. They looked at what was and dared to believe in what could be. That's the heart of faith. It's not based on what your eyes can see, it's based on what your spirit knows. You might not have the evidence yet, but you have the promise. You might not feel the breakthrough yet, but you've decided not to break. You might still be surrounded by the problem, but your words are filled with possibility. Faith doesn't wait for the change to come before it starts talking like it's already here. It starts declaring healing while the pain is still present. It starts praising while the chains are still on. It starts rejoicing even while the tears are still falling. This kind of faith is not passive. It's active. It's alive. It gets up every morning and says, I know what I'm facing, but I also know who is with me. It walks into dark places with light in its eyes. It doesn't need applause or confirmation or signs. It just needs a whisper from God and the courage to believe it. And every time faith speaks, heaven leans in. Every time faith declares, the atmosphere clears. Not just words, it's a weapon. It's not just belief, it's boldness in action. You don't need faith when everything's going great. You need it when nothing makes sense. When the finances are tight, when the relationship is broken, when the door didn't open, when the answer hasn't come. That's when faith becomes more than an idea, it becomes your foundation. It holds you steady when everything else is shaking. It reminds you that the same God who brought you through before will do it again. That just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't. That delay is not denial. That silence is not absence. That pain is not purposeless. Faith is a decision before it's ever a feeling. It means standing in the rubble and saying, I still believe. It means choosing joy when you don't feel like laughing. It means speaking victory when all you see is struggle. It means trusting that your story is still being written and that this chapter is not the final one. Faith doesn't wait for comfort, it rises in conflict. It doesn't depend on certainty, it thrives in risk. And sometimes, the greatest act of faith is simply refusing to quit, refusing to give in, refusing to let go of the dream, even when it looks like nothing is moving. Your words matter in this process. What you speak in the middle of your pain shapes the atmosphere of your life. If you declare defeat, you feed it. But if you declare hope, you invite it. If you keep saying, I'm never getting out of this, you're building a cage with your own voice. But when you start saying, I don't know how, but God's not finished. You start breaking chains. You start releasing possibilities. You start shifting the energy around you. That's why faith isn't quiet. It doesn't sit still and hope for the best. It speaks, it moves, it believes out loud. Faith is not the absence of fear. It's choosing to trust in the face of fear. It's choosing to believe that the same power that raised Jesus from the grave is alive in you, working on your behalf, guiding your steps, even when the road is hidden. Faith lets you breathe in chaos, sing in silence, and walk forward even when you can't see the next step. Because it doesn't deny the valley, it just knows the mountaintop is coming. It doesn't ignore the tears, it just believes that joy is on the other side. It doesn't wait for perfection, it declares purpose in the process.